The winning blueprint presents the Redskins Report.
Welcome, my fellow Redskin brethren, as well as sistren. I am your man and resident Redskins fan, Lou. Thank you for joining me back here on the Redskins Report. Now, we're going into training camp, and so this is a very exciting time. As you all know, we're huge football fans. We love our skins, and it's about that time to kick it back into high gear. And you're going to be following training camp. You want to know what's going on. They're moving camp to Richmond this year, so that's a first for the Redskins. It's going to be very exciting. I told you I had some big news for you, so I'll just start the show off with that. Let's just let the cat out of the bag right now, right off the bat. I will be doing a show live from training camp. Now, how much of the show will be actually from training camp? I don't know, because I don't know the stipulations of the camera, and will they let me bring it inside the training facility to record practice, and all the legalities of that. They might not want any fans bringing cameras and things of that nature into the facility. So I don't know how much of it I'll actually be able to get on film, but I will be there. You'll know I was there, and I will come back and report to you my findings from training camp. So I'm looking forward to doing that. I'm looking forward to bringing that to you. That's going to be a lot of fun, but we're going into training camp, and there are a lot of questions to ask, and we won't answer many of them. I'll just pose a few of them, and there are plenty more questions to ask as we start to head into training camp. But there are about 5 that I want to pose to you today, and we'll go down the list of questions. And again, we don't have to answer them right now, and we won't be able to answer some of them right now. Only time will tell and give us our answer. But there are some questions, some burning questions that you have to ask yourself as the Redskins get ready to head over to Richmond for training camp. So let's start with the biggest question. Let's just get the elephant out of the room. There's no need to dance around other questions and act as if this question isn't the biggest one. Of course, you know what I'm speaking about: the health of quarterback Robert Griffin III. Now, we all know his impact on the season we had last year, and we all know his impact on this roster and this franchise. And so a healthy Robert Griffin III is the only way we'll be able to win in 2013 and moving forward. And you hear all the reports, and I heard about Robert potentially going to a doctor to see how his leg is healing because he wants to start training camp. That's not necessary. And I don't think the Redskins need to rush this process. Keep in mind that we're dealing with major knee surgery. Anytime you have surgery on a tendon, like the ACL, or a ligament, I should say, like an ACL or an MCL, you got to be careful, because you can do all of the work you want to strengthen that knee and the muscles around it, but those ligaments need time. Only time can heal those ligaments. Keep that in mind. And so he might be doing everything possible physically to get back onto the field, and he may have strengthened all of those muscles, and that knee may feel great. But keep in mind that those ligaments haven't fully healed themselves yet. And again, you look at Adrian Peterson and what he was able to do. We're talking about different people here. Do not take Adrian Peterson's case and extrapolate that to other people. You cannot do that. Adrian Peterson is a separate animal. He healed a lot faster than many others, faster than I've ever seen anyone come back from an ACL injury, and performed at a level we've never seen someone come back and perform at, fresh off of an ACL injury. But you can't take that example and project it to Robert Griffin III. You can't do it. You don't need to do it. Just take as much time as you need to heal this injury. We know how Robert can be gun-ho sometimes and want to go above and beyond. This isn't one of those situations where that is necessary. We're in it for the long haul. We're in it for not only 2013, but 2014, 15, 16, and so forth and beyond. We want this guy to be around in 10 years, in 12 years. We don't need to sacrifice the future for 2013. It's not that important. So come back when you're ready, but that's definitely the first question, the health of Robert Griffin III. So you look at the next question, and I think this was one that you can kind of sweep under the rug if you like, but I'm not one that likes to sweep anything under the rug. I want everything out in the open. I want to talk about everything, and that's the direction of this offense. When Robert comes back, whenever that is, it could be training camp. I don't want to see this guy in the preseason if I don't have to. If at all possible, I don't want to see this guy until week 1. And you can scoff at me all you like and say, hey, how can this guy not play in the preseason? I don't want this guy playing in the preseason. I don't want him exposed in the preseason. I don't want this guy playing at all until the regular season. If he's not ready to go in week 1, don't go in week 1. Whenever you're 100% ready, when the doctors are 100% sure that everything and all precautions and measures have been taken and this guy's ready to step back on the field, so be it. But not a second before. And so the offense, though, we know how dynamic it was last year. We were explosive offensively last year. For the first time in a long time, it was fun to watch this offense. And you got to ask yourself in 2013, are they going to dial some of that stuff back? You feel like they must. They got to dial some of it back, right? I mean, you can't put Robert at risk. And yes, the Redskins will argue that when the injuries occurred to Robert Griffin III, they were on ad-libs. They were on plays where it had broken down, and Robert took it upon himself to try to create something, make something happen outside of the pocket. So if you subscribe to that theory and that notion that, hey, Robert only got hurt on his own volition when he decided to run out of the pocket after a play had broken down, then you think the offense might not have to be tweaked that much. But I beg to differ. He ran the football a lot last year on read option, and you can't have him running the football as much as he did in his rookie season. You got to protect this guy a lot more. You got to come with more of a traditional approach to the quarterback position. Now, trust me, read option is not going to be abandoned altogether. You're still going to see the read option. You're still going to see Robert running the football in some form or capacity. He's got to get down. He's got to use out of bounds more judiciously. Of course, all of these things are definites, but I think the offense is going to be a lot more standard. I don't think you're going to see as much read option and things that come off of it like you did a season ago. And you got to ask yourself, how does that change this offense? How does this change the running game? Yes, Alfred Morris was a monster last year, but you also have to take into consideration the impact that the read option had on this running game. I mean, you look at a lot of the games and how the defenses were playing read option, they were lost. Defensive ends didn't know whether to crash down on the back or stay at home for the quarterback. There was a lot of indecision. I used to love watching when the Redskins played against the Giants because Jason Pierre-Paul and really didn't know what to do. I mean, there was times where he was just simply lost. But that was a lot of defensive ends last year against this offense last year. I mean, that offense put you in a tough position. You had to make a choice, and if you picked the wrong thing, it was a nice 9-yard to 15 to maybe 30-yard gain waiting for us. So the read option isn't going to be abandoned altogether, but it's going to be scaled back. But how would that affect Alfred Morris in his run game? Alfred Morris was huge for us, but a lot of his yardage came because we were so successful with read option. And don't you think for one second that it wasn't because of it. Now, yes, we still ran our stretch and zone run blocking scheme, and he got a lot of yardage out of that as well, and we wore teams down with the running game. But with less read option comes less things defenses have to prepare for. And I think teams are going to be a lot more prepared for read option this year. I think that defenses are going to put emphasis on stopping read option. So I don't think it's going to be as successful as it was a season ago. But nonetheless, how will the play calling change in 2013? I'm anxious to see that because I feel like you got to scale it back a bit. I feel like teams are going to be geared up to stop this offense a lot better in 2013 than they were in 2012. They're going to be a lot more prepared. And so I think they're going to have to make some tweaks to this offense to adjust to the adjustment that's being made to stop this offense. So be anxious to see how the running game responds to that monumental year that we had a season ago, groundbreaking. And anxious to see how this passing game, because a lot of what we did in the passing game, Robert was very accurate last season, percentage-wise, and very accurate and efficient as a quarterback because of the read option as well. I mean, we sucked defenses up. I mean, how many times did you see linebackers be sucked in by read option, pull the football out, and Robert throw a quick pop pass to Fred Davis, to Santana Moss, to Pierre Garçon? And there were no linebackers in the area within 5 yards. They had all vacated because they got sucked up by read option. There were so many options available. Josh Morgan, guys were open last year, and Robert hit them in stride because of read option. So if you take that element away somewhat, how does that affect the offense? Be interesting to see adjustments made by Kyle Shanahan and this offensive coaching staff to see what we will do to address this offense to be better and more efficient in 2013. And you know the adjustments are coming. Be sure of that. So you look at another question that I have, and you know the secondary was porous last year at times. I thought we played a lot better toward the end of the season, but nonetheless, we were bad on defense. And it caught up with us in the end. Had some injuries that weren't favorable to us in our secondary. Had some suspensions. We all know about Tanard Jackson and his issues off the field. He wasn't able to help us. We know about Brandon Merriweather, his injury that limited him at the beginning of the season. He comes back and then fully tears the ACL. He had strained it earlier. And so we knew about the injury situation in the secondary. How is this secondary going to respond in 2013? All right. And you got to start at the safety position because we drafted rookies to come in and help us. We've got guys coming back. And I think it's a position that has gotten immensely better just on paper. But on the field, you still have to see the finished product. We don't know who's going to start. You still got to hope, keep your fingers crossed that Brandon Merriweather is able to come back healthy from that ACL tear. And they're looking for him to come back and be ready for training camp. I don't know if he'll be quite ready at the beginning of training camp or not. Think he will be? I'm not sure, but at some point he'll be ready to rock and roll during training camp. And they expect him to be ready to go for the season. You look at Dijon Gomes, here's a guy that's getting better, and he's still a young guy, but you're looking for him to turn that corner at the safety position. Reed Doughty is a consummate professional. A lot of people like to bag and rag on Reed Doughty. I'm a Reed Doughty fan because if you put him in positions to succeed, Reed Doughty will get the job done. I've never been let down by Reed Doughty in a position where we put him somewhere where he excels. When you put Reed Doughty in the box and ask him to make a tackle, Reed Doughty makes the tackle. When you put Reed Doughty out 25 yards away from the line of scrimmage and ask him to take a half of the field away, he's not in his comfort zone. He's not where he can excel. And when he gets beat, I don't want to hear anyone complain because that's not a position that you need to have Reed Doughty in. You ask Reed Doughty to make tackles around the line of scrimmage. He can do that. You ask Reed Doughty to play in coverage 15 yards and in at the line of scrimmage. He can do that. You ask Reed Doughty to turn his hips and run 30 yards down the field. Now he's out of his comfort zone. And when he gives up plays, I don't want to hear anyone's mouth because you know of the deficiencies already beforehand. Don't put him in a position where he's vulnerable. And I love Reed Doughty because he gives us everything he's got on special teams and he gives us everything he's got when he's in the game. And he's a very productive player. I've never seen Reed Doughty just flat out miss a tackle. Never. And so there is something to be said about what Reed Doughty brings to this football team. So all of you Redskins fans that have a problem with Reed Doughty, don't have a problem with Reed Doughty because he does his job and he does what we ask him to do. Have a problem with defensive coordinator Jim Haslett putting this guy in precarious situations which allow him to be taken advantage of. So don't kill the messenger. Don't fuss at Reed Doughty for being the only safety back against the Houston Texans and Andre Johnson leaping 5 inches over him and snatching the football down and coming down with a touchdown en route to a comeback loss when the Texans beat us. And everyone wants to be up in arms about Reed Doughty being in one-on-one coverage with Andre Johnson. What did you think would happen? I mean, that's not his strength. His strength is helping us in special teams. His strength is helping us in the box as a run defender. His strength is being 15 yards away from the line of scrimmage and running with a slot receiver. That's his strength, not covering 30 yards down the field in no man's land. So I think Reed Doughty is a guy that needs to be around. We'll see how his performance is in camp, but I love Reed Doughty. So there's some questions at safety. You got the rookies. We'll talk about that here in a second, but let's go to the cornerback position. And you look at the corner situation is another one that we'll talk about here in a second, but a lot of young guys that are up and coming. And let's save that for our debate here a little bit later. We'll talk about that here in a second with the safety. But that's another question you got to ask yourself. Is this secondary as a whole going to be better in 2013 than it was in 2012? We have to hope as fans that this thing is much better, because if we want to repeat as NFC East champions, the defense needs to be a lot better. I think the run defense was great last year. I don't have any complaints in that department. I thought we were stout against the run. Pass-wise, you know what it was. I don't have to go into that. We got to be better in pass defense, and it starts with the secondary. You can get pressure on a quarterback as much as you like. That always helps. And I'll talk about that here in a second as well. But the essence of any pass defense in this league is in the secondary. You got to be able to cover, because you're going to get, 5-yard passes, 7-yard passes. Those are going to be given up. But you can't give up 3rd and 11. You can't give up 15 on 3rd and 11. You can't give up the home run in a situation where the other team needs a touchdown to win the game. You can't do it. You can't put your team in situations where they have to outscore the opponent all the time because you're giving up plays in the passing game. Can't happen. Redskins shouldn't have to score 34 points to win a ball game because you're giving up 31. Can't happen. Redskins have to be better in the secondary in 2013. So let's address 2 more questions and then get out of here. The next question I want to look at is Brian Orakpo. How will he come back in the 2013 campaign? Is he fully healthy? Is he ready to rock and roll? And what are we going to get out of Brian Orakpo? Is he ready to take that next step? He's in a contract season. He talks about wanting to rip it up in 2013. I'm ready to see what Brian Orakpo really is. I'm going to find out a lot about this man in 2013. And I'm a Brian Orakpo fan. I think this guy has the utmost talent and potential. But it's time for that potential to turn into unbridled, pure, unadulterated havoc. Now, it's time for him to be a talent and not a guy that's potentially talented. I'm ready to see the full spectrum of Brian Orakpo. And I think it's time. And I want to go over his career in a nutshell so that you understand where I'm coming from, because I'm not sold on Brian Orakpo. I need more. Okay, so let's start with his rookie season and work our way up, because we're talking about a 2-time Pro Bowler, but I'm not sure if this guy is a Pro Bowler yet. In my mind, he's not Pro Bowl caliber in this league. And he gets mad when people don't put him in the upper echelon of pass rushers, but here's why they don't. And let me break this down for you. We start in 2009. He gets 11 sacks and makes it to a Pro Bowl, his best season by far in his career to this point. You look at that season, and I was thoroughly impressed with Orakpo. I thought that he was very consistent throughout that year. But keep in mind, he had 11 sacks. 4 of those sacks came in Week 15 against the Oakland Raiders in a game in which he destroyed whoever the left tackle was. I don't know if it was Mario Henderson or whoever it was. He absolutely destroyed the Raiders that day. I mean, he was all over the place. He got 4 sacks in that game, which is a career high for him. And that's how you get to 11. I mean, you take that game away, you're looking at 7 sacks over 16 games. You're talking about essentially a half a sack per game almost. And so that was impressive for his rookie campaign. You can't take that 4-sack game away. Impressive. 11 sacks. Sky's the limit. I'm loving it. Then you go to 2010, and that's when you start to see that this guy's a one-trick pony. The only move that he has is this speed rush with the rip to the outside. He's starting to get hog-tied, and tackles are starting to put him in sleeper holes. He's not getting the flags called as much, and it's very disappointing. He ends up with 8.5 sacks in that season, but he still makes it to the Pro Bowl. I don't know how, because 8.5 sacks isn't that great of a total in this league, but let's delve deeper into that 8.5 sack total. And what you will find is that 4.5 of those sacks came in 2 games. He had 2.5 sacks versus the Packers, another 2 sacks against the Bears. You got 4.5 of your 8.5 total in 2 games. So what were you doing for the other 14 games of the season when you only totaled 4 sacks? That's a problem for me. I need more consistency over the life of the season. I don't need you to go off in 2 games and then be non-existent in 10 others. I need more from Orakpo. I need a sack here. I need 2 sacks in week 4. I need 3 sacks in week 6. I need 2 sacks in week 8, 1 in 9, 1 in 10, another 2 in week 11, another sack and a half in week 13. I need consistency. I need teams to be scared of you week in, week out. You go to 2011, his last full season of work with the Redskins. He gets 9 sacks. Okay, better than his 8.5 sack total in 2010. However, we're still not at that double-digit sack total, which you would like if you have a premier pass rusher. So you get 9 sacks, but you take a look at it, and lo and behold, we find that in the season finale, he had 2 sacks against the Eagles. In another game against the St. Louis Rams, he had 2 sacks. So you look at 9 sacks and you take away 4 of those sacks because they came in 2 games. What were you doing for the other 14 games of the season when you only had 5 sacks? That's my problem with Orakpo. We're getting high concentrations of sacks in specific games, and in other games we're getting absolutely nothing. There are too many games where he posts 0 sacks, and then you can say, okay, well, maybe he's getting pressure, hurries on the quarterback, but he's not. He's getting held. They're not calling it. So if they're not calling it, then it's not beneficial to us. The reason he's getting held is because he's predictable. He's using that speed rip rush to the outside, but he's not using a alternate move. And what we call that in the league is a counter move. He doesn't have a counter to his best move, which is the speed outside rush move. There should be a spin move. There should be a hard outside back inside move. There should be a swim inside move. There should be some kind of counter to that hard outside rush, that speed rush with the rip. So when they're looking for that, you come with the counter, you get them off balance. Now they don't know which one to look for. I can't take all my weight as a tackle and distribute it outside, because if I do that, if I commit to the outside too fast, he'll go inside and beat me that way. And so he doesn't give tackles other things they need to prepare for. And so I need more consistency from Orakpo. I need to see that in 2013. Going to definitely be anxious to see what he brings to the table in 2013, because it is a contract year. It is going to be a big decision for the Redskins if he does not. If this guy comes out and gives us another 8.5, what do? I want to know. You guys tell me how you feel. If he gives you another 8.5 sacks and he wants big boy money, he wants premier outside rushing linebacker, DeMarcus Ware, Mario Williams type money, if he wants ridiculous money, what do? Because 8.5 isn't enough for me. I got that from Ryan Kerrigan last year. I don't want two 8.5 sack guys. And I think Kerrigan is getting better. He might go get double digits this season. I don't know. I really like what Ryan Kerrigan is doing on the other side. So what do you do if he gives you 8.5 this year? How do you feel about 8.5? Because I'm telling you right now, 8.5 isn't enough for me. I'm greedy. If you're going to be elite, you're going to cry that you're elite, you want someone to recognize you as elite, then you need to act as if you're an elite pass rusher. You need to post double-digit sack totals. So I need 10 minimum. I really want 12. So we'll see. But I want to ask that question to you guys. How do you feel about Orakpo? And if he posts 8.5, what do? If he's crying, if he wants reasonable money at 8.5, I want him back. But if he's talking about, hey, I need to be paid like an upper echelon pass rush specialist in this league, and you only getting 8.5, I can't help you. I can't do it. So the last question that I pose is, going into camp, there are going to be some camp battles, some positional battles. And I want to take a look at several of these right off the bat. And the first one that comes to mind is right tackle. And I'm a Tyler Columbus guy. I think that we can definitely upgrade that position, but I don't think we necessarily have the guys on the roster to do so. So if we don't, then I say you just stick with what got you to the show, and that was Tyler Columbus. I don't know if a guy like Tom, straight out of Compton, is starting to blossom and they like what they see out of him. Last time I checked, he was slated to be the backup left tackle, but why keep this guy in a box as a backup behind Trent Williams? Why not allow this guy to go over the right tackle if you feel that good about him? So maybe he'll be in the mix. But I know the Redskins went out and got Tony Pashos in free agency, as well as Jeremy Trueblood. They're both looking to unseat Tyler Columbus. I just don't see it happening. But you never know. That's what training camp is for. The preseason, we'll see how this group gels together, and if one of these other guys from the outside can come in and infiltrate that right tackle position. We'll see. But that's a camp battle to pay attention to. Also, running back. Not for the number one spot. Alfred Morris has that on lock. I'm talking about guys getting carries to offset Alfred Morris. And last year, that guy was Evan Royster, but that was by default. That was out of necessity. There was no Roy Halou. There was no other back. Evan Royster was in the game because we didn't have any other options. I feel like we were missing that element of speed last season in the backfield, and I think Roy Halou brings that. We also drafted a young guy in Chris Thompson that brings an element of speed to the game as well. I think Halou is still our fastest back on the roster, and so if he's healthy, I love Roy Halou. I think you guys already know that. I love what he brings to the table in terms of versatility. He's our best, by far our best pass-catching threat out of the backfield. I think he's not as shifty as you would like from a guy with speed, but in a straight line, there's no one faster at the running back position on our team than Roy Halou Jr. And so the question you got to ask yourself, though, is will he make the roster? Because if he can't stay healthy, I don't know if he makes this roster or not. That's the key. If he's healthy, he's on this roster. No doubt in my mind, and I think he's the second back on this depth chart if healthy. If he has another toe injury, if he tweaks a hammy, if he has a high ankle sprain and misses 2 or 3 weeks worth of camp, can't play in 2 or 3 preseason games, what does that do to Roy Halou's chances to make this roster? I mean, this is a huge season for him. If he can't play, I don't think he makes this roster. And I love Roy Halou Jr., and I would hate to see him not make this roster. But he's got to stay healthy. So that's a position to keep an eye on. You also look at wide receiver. A lot of bodies. Only 5 positions, I think, are going to be handed out at the receiver position. Maybe 6. Depends on if they decide to trim off some fat on another position to make way for an extra receiver on this roster. But with no Brandon Banks, and I guess you could classify him as a receiver, maybe there will be an extra roster spot for a guy in that particular area, because I feel like 4 guys are a lock, barring any injuries. Let's just assume there are no injuries. Four guys are a lock. I think the only guy that may not be a lock, a shoe-in for a receiver spot, is Aldrick Robinson. And I love Aldrick Robinson, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you out there feel the same way. The element of speed that he brings to the table is one that cannot be discounted, and I think he has to be around, but you just don't know. But you already know what we have at receiver. You know there's Pierre Garçon, you know there's Santana Moss, you know there's Joshua Morgan, you know there's Leonard Hankerson, you know that there's Aldrick Robinson, like I just mentioned. There are a lot of guys on the outside looking into the receiver position, though, that are trying to find a way to make this roster. And so you can't discount those guys. You got an undrafted free agent from a season ago in Lance Lewis out of East Carolina, big, physical 6'2" receiver that can catch the football. Redskins like him a lot. You also look at an undrafted free agent from this year in Sky Dawson, 5'9", very diminutive, but can move, is extremely fast. We're talking about a burner here. And so that could be the guy that you look to for some special teams relief and could fill in that Brandon Banks role. So there are some guys looking to infiltrate this roster. Don't forget about Desmond Briscoe. Redskins also have a few more veterans in Devery Henderson, and also Dante Stallworth is back. I don't expect Stallworth to make this roster, but you never know in this league. And so there are a lot of wide receivers vying for, I think, 5 at max 6 available spots. And I think that 4 to 5 of them are already filled, barring injury. So that's another camp battle in a position of note to keep an eye on. Then you go to the cornerback position. Josh Wilson going into his contract season. Don't know if he'll be back or not. You have a guy in E.J. Biggers that the Redskins went out and got in free agency. And then you look at a guy like Richard Crawford, who came onto the scene last year and I thought played well and is going to get better. They're looking for big things from him. And then you look at someone that was an undrafted free agent a season ago that hurt himself again. He's got injury issues. They're hoping that those have been resolved in Chase Minifield out of Virginia. And so there are some cornerbacks on this roster already. You look at, of course, David Amerson, who was drafted. And so there are not a lot of slots available at the cornerback position. Let's just assume that 5 make the roster. Well, you've got D'Angelo Hall. You've got Josh Wilson. You've got Richard Crawford. You've got E.J. Biggers. You've got David Amerson. That's 5 right there. So you look at the cornerback position and you got to ask yourself, how many corners are making this roster? How many guys are they going to keep? And who are going to be those 5 guys? So again, that's another position to look at, cornerback. You also look at safety, and we know about the struggles at the safety position. That's definitely one we want to keep an eye on. You expect a guy like Brandon Merriweather to be back, of course. And so you look at some of the other guys, Reed Dowdy, Dijon Gomes. That's 3 safeties right there. You look at the 2 that are drafted, they're going to be on the roster, and Bakari Rambo and Phillip Thomas. So you're looking at 5 safeties there. I thought Jordan Pugh played a solid role at safety last year. So that's 6 that you have in the mix. And so the Redskins have some decisions to make at the safety position because they're not keeping 6 safeties. They probably won't keep 5 safeties. They'll probably only keep 4 when the season starts. Maybe they keep 5. Who knows? Again, when they start trimming the fat off of some of these other positions, they may decide to keep 5 safeties. Then you also have to remember that the Redskins still have a safety that hasn't played it down for us yet, but they're extremely high on him. I don't expect him to make this roster because you can't have the off the field issues like he's had and expect him to be a contributor, someone that you rely on, knowing that this guy just doesn't get it after being suspended 3 times for the same infraction. I just don't think the Redskins can invest any trust into Tanard Jackson, but he's still on the roster as well. He can't even set foot in Redskins camp until August 31st. And so camp is over at that point, essentially. You're into the preseason. The season is about to kick off once you start talking about September. I don't think this guy can make the roster. And so he's another guy you got to throw in the mix as well, though. So safety, definitely a position that you have to keep an eye on. And so those are just a few of the positions I want to focus in on and have you kind of focusing in on as camp gets kicked off and gets underway this week, and that is going to do it for the Redskins report today. I feel like I've given you a few things that you want to look at as we start to talk Redskins football as camp is about to commence. Those are all things that I want to pay attention to. None bigger than the quarterback situation, of course, but we'll see how all of these things iron themselves out as Redskins camp gets underway this week. Of course, I am a Redskins fan, etched in burgundy and gold. My Redskins spirit will never die. My Redskins spirit will never fold. Until we meet again, hail to the Redskins. I will see you in the near future.
The Redskins Report.